Welcome back to the new Workspace. We're excited to be extending the series and launching 3 new episodes to further explore how the modern workplace has evolved and the global shift to increased flexibility. In the past 3 episodes, we've discussed what it means to be a digital worker, how to enable today's remote digital workforce, and how to prepare for the unpredictable. In episode 4, we'll be focusing on the role of leadership in the new world of work. How do leaders and employees navigate a return to the office while juggling workplace culture, productivity, and employee experience? I'm Safi Obadilla, Field CTO at Citrix, and today I'm joined by Daryl, Katerina, and Maria. I'll have each one of them introduce themselves. Daryl, let's start with you.
Hello, my name's Daryl Scott. I'm a director at an agency group in London, a group of agencies, mainly digital. And we're an SME. There's only about 100 of us, or just under. So recent events have been extraordinarily impactful on a business of our size.
I can imagine. Thanks, Daryl. Katerina?
Yeah, my name is Katerina. I'm a business psychologist and managing director of Innovation Bubble. We are a small behavioral insights and solutions consultancy helping brands and companies to better understand human behavior and what can be done to increase engagement, motivation, well-being, and so on.
Well, I think it's certainly an interesting time for the type of work that you do in terms of the shift that employees have had. So interesting to hear more from you as well. And finally, Maria.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Maria Trivellato. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition for Citrix, based in Paris. So I'm working for, well, my leadership for EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa.
No worries.
Happy to be here.
All right. Thank you. So now let's get started. I really wanted to start by reflecting back on how we got here. Obviously organizations had to quickly respond with the spread of COVID-19 and the lockdown that followed. And it meant that we had to quickly empower employees to be able to work from home. And it wasn't just a temporary thing or a couple of days a week, but it was full time. So Daryl, I wanted to start with you. I mean, it'd be interesting to understand for you and your organization, how did you have to adapt to that lockdown and the whole shift to remote working, and how did you lead your organization through this?
Wow. Well, it certainly happened in phases. There was the sort of immediate shock of it as it became apparent how drastically things were changing. And we work in lots of sectors, so we had some sectors that at first appeared to be relatively unaffected and others that were completely devastated. It really was a full stop. So from a leadership point of view, there was this scramble for the first 2 weeks to understand what the government was offering us and to make arrangements and make some fairly big decisions about what we were planning moving forward based on what we could learn in a very short space of time. And we were very fortunate in that from a continuity point of view, it weren't dramatically affected, with no redundancies or anything like that, but there was still a lot of work to do. And then at the same time, we suddenly had this workforce who were at home, relatively unsupported, highly disrupted in terms of their sort of operational flow of tasks or whatever. So we dug up as many innovative, future-focused initiatives as we could to give people that sense of moving forward and a future focus immediately. And we're very lucky in that a year and a half ago, we implemented a 4-day week as a business.
Wow.
And we have a work from home whenever you want policy anyway. So we were relatively well set up with it technically and as a culture. But having said that, just the sort of house arrest of lockdown was, there was a lot more to it than just making sure that people had what they needed operationally.
No, that's right. And I think that's the important thing. The one thing was just helping people set themselves up to work from home. But in this type of environment, this lockdown, you had all these extra things as well, with potentially kids at home doing school as well. You've got no real outlets on the weekend through breaks because bars, clubs, sports are all off. So it's a very extreme version of remote working. Katerina, what about you? I mean, you obviously work with a lot of companies in this space. how did you yourselves as an organization go through it? And what did you see with your customers and other people that you work with?
Yeah, so for us, it wasn't such a big change because we used to work from home a long time before. So we only basically went outside if we wanted to work remotely in shared working spaces, or we've been a lot with our clients in their offices. So there was a lot of commuting from that perspective. But from a management and from a technical setup, we were quite used to working from home. So that was kind of our advantage in the beginning, because we didn't have that drastic adaptation period at all. And that allowed us to help our customers and our clients a lot better and quicker. So we actually had conversations, we had support programs, we wrote articles really quickly, because we kind of knew already, how to manage the workforce remotely, how to set the boundaries at home if possible. But as you said, it was a very extreme situation, which, is very different from normal working from home. If you don't have homeschooling, if you don't have anxiety going on, the whole emotional well-being was obviously also present with us, which was new and needed to be managed as well. And I think we saw with a lot of organizations, very big ones who've never been used to working from home whatsoever, they really struggled. It was literally just almost like a shutdown for 2 or 3 weeks, and almost like, what is Zoom and how do I deal with this? And where are my people? And huge anxieties around, from the employee side as well, around being productive and not showing productivity to the managers anymore. But yeah, it wasn't easy, but slowly companies adapted. And I think now, we will see it becomes easier and easier, hopefully.
That's right. That's right. And Maria, from a Citrix perspective, obviously there's a lot of the solutions we provide enable remote working. So through this period, we work with a lot of organizations to help them with their plans on remote working. How did we adapt as a company?
I think we're lucky that we have remote work in our DNA, I would say. Yeah. So we moved home within 24 hours almost, but it's true that, given the situation, it was a different one than just remote working. And I think we did pretty well. And it's, as I always say, if you really want to know a person, watch them under stress, because it's really there. You see, it's true with the organizations as well. It's how they communicate, how they organize themselves, the values they demonstrate. And I think we really brought out our values very quickly, and in the center, and putting the employee experience in the center of it, and using those values to make people comfortable. The things that we did, and we had communications, constant communication from David, our CEO, from the security offices, from HR, and people felt sort of safe, and they felt also safe to do what they needed to do, because we had, they took some examples of what we did is 100% of salary if you or your family member was sick, if you needed to take extra time off for homeschooling of your kids, if you couldn't work from home at all, you were still paid 100%. So, and we even had an extra bonus to all employees just for the sort of extra cost of having a home office set up, because many didn't have that. So I think that helped a lot, just to have that comfort with people, to feel that Citrix actually took care of them, and they understood the difficulty of everyone, and everybody had a different situation.
No, and I think that's really important. That's one less thing at least the employee needs to be worried about, one less burden there. And I think, in times of crisis, the way the leaders respond is so critical to the resulting comfort level that the employee has in moving forward. So I guess that brings me to my next question. And Maria, I'll stay with you. What sort of leader do you think we need in times of crisis? And this crisis is probably one of the biggest ones most people will deal with in their lifetime.
Absolutely. And I think we're moving towards looking, me as a recruitment leader as well, we're looking more at the soft skills today than the hard skills and the technical skills that we needed before. I mean, things like, well, of course, in a crisis like this, it's empathy, most of all, agility and flexibility that we need. And also that switch and trusting your people, keeping people accountable, and measuring performance by outcome and results instead of just activity, because you don't see the people. I mean, the old-fashioned way was, I need to see you to know that you're working. You can't do that anymore.
No, that's right. I mean, I think that old notion of presenteeism, I mean, this has really changed, right? I mean, for ages, the expectation for a lot of people was, I don't trust you if I can't see you. You need to be in the office. And this has really ripped that bandage right off. And I think it's good. I think in most cases, people have adjusted well.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. And I think one of the biggest, change, I think, for a leader had been that we need great coaches. We need somebody who listens to their employees, and that we've seen in many of our studies that we've done as well in the research. Has come out that people want a manager today who listens to them, who understands their situation, and who's a real coach instead of just telling them what to do.
That's right. I mean, Daryl, from your perspective, what type of leader do you think we need in times of crisis?
Yeah, I'm always, I mean, my career before this was, I spent 10 years in exec coaching and leadership development and stuff. So I have some sort of fairly strong opinions, but I'm always interested in how leadership and management are used interchangeably, even though they're just such extraordinarily different things. Yes. And I think in terms of what we need in leadership, it's the same as it's always been. You know, it's being driven by vision and values. It's being future focused. It's, you know, the leader's job is change, and of course, through our visible behavior, you know, leaders create culture. So iconic actions and those kind of things. But at the management level, I think it's a much more different game. You know, that's where, you know, micromanagement or, you know, presenteeism or, you know, managing task rather than managing outcome, or having low levels of trust, all of these things that, you know, pretty bad management anyway, but they're being exposed as being dreadful. And I've got some interesting stats where we've scraped a load of unstructured data from social channels and looked at the language being used now compared to prior to COVID. And the terms middle management are 16.5 times more commonly used than they were just 7 months ago. And then as we dig into the verbatums and we work out what's underneath that, there's some of it is a sympathy for the difficulty in herding cats and being in a middle management position at the moment, but a lot of it is around questioning the value of a lot of the middle management activities, and justifying their existence. There are terms like the bloated middle, managers behaving nervously or questioning their own value. So I think it's been a catalyst for that's really shined a light on management and the kind of the managers that do lead by outcome and listen to people and feedback comes upwards and they respond well to that. I think I'm sure are doing fine, but anyone who has a slightly more industrial and old-fashioned approach to management, I think will probably be finding it difficult.
Yeah, and I think you raised an important point where poor management could somehow in the past have been masked because everyone's in the office and they can just move on. But in a circumstance like this, where it's all remote, a lot of those things come to the surface and are more exposed, right? And I think the impact is almost amplified on their employees. I mean, Katerina, what are your thoughts on this?
I 100% agree with Maria and Daryl on all the aspects that they've mentioned. I think in these times of crisis, I think it's really important that leaders have a clear direction and a vision where they want to go, which is obviously challenging because everything is so new. But it comes back to the change in leadership that we are going towards a more horizontal leadership, and all the leaders, they don't need to have all the answers as it used to be. It's not like employees are looking up and please tell us what to do. There's so much potential ideas within the workforce, and leaders just need to listen and be open and ask employees, okay, what do you think? You know, what do you think where we can go, what we can do, and tapping into that knowledge, into the expertise, into the potential, which would help them massively to create that direction, to create the vision, to lead as well. So I think that shift is accelerated now, or hopefully, with many organizations, away from that vertical leadership towards a more horizontal one. And as Maria said, listening, crucial. I think the communication skills are just so important now, working remotely.
Yes. And so on that topic of working remotely, you mentioned the fact that your organization has always done that. So this was not really much of a change, but what do you think the difference is in the way you manage people remotely versus when they're in the office?
Well, I think all the subtlety that you pick up in an office environment, all the nonverbal stuff, the opportunities to just go over to the desk or have a coffee in between or have lunch together, that obviously is gone, but there's so much value and so much information in these subtle interactions that give science and ideas to managers, to leaders, to employees of what is the culture, what's the mood, what do I need to address here? And I think that is a huge change when managing remotely. How do I get that subtlety? How do I find out how employees are feeling, how they are doing? And it requires what we've seen. It requires extra meetings. It requires away from the task, away from the business talks, but more on the emotional, more on the how are you doing? That needs to be integrated, because we just don't have the opportunity to pick that up.
No, that's right. And I think the important thing there I've seen in some studies talking about absolutely what you said, the need to check in and see how employees are doing. But conversely, at times, some employees look at that as I'm being micromanaged. I'm being checked up on to see if I'm doing work and that. And so, Darryl, I wouldn't mind your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think, we talked about the subtleties in the workplace that perhaps don't exist, and it isn't the same kind of human connection when we communicate through other medium. And I'll come on to the human connection a bit in a while, because it's really important. But there are also subtleties that still exist, even in this forum. There are implicit senses of your manager's expectation on you. And based on the manager you've got, you may feel very, very liberated, or you may feel like you need to be constantly available on instant messenger. And it may create some degree of a tyranny, really, that if you've got a manager that isn't good with not being able to look and see if you're at your desk or whatever else. So I think that there are accidental subtleties and implicit expectations that are coming across, and it's really tricky to address that stuff, because just having a policy doesn't quite do it. It's
that's right.
a very live, organic thing.
That's right. And it's interesting what you said. I was actually having a conversation with a friend who works in a financial institution, and he was having a bad experience with his manager. And what he was doing was seeing his manager's availability on Teams to say, look, my manager's not even online. He's offline all the time. And so employees are, to your point, picking up on those subtle hints of what people are doing and what people aren't doing, and looking at their availability in all these remote collaboration tools and making assumptions based on that. So yeah, it's a tough time, I think, for both employees and managers, just to manage expectations. Maria, what's your thoughts?
I think that also, well, one thing that we came up against was the video conferences all the time, where the managers, and we in the beginning we said, well, now we're at home, so we need to use the video conferencing all the time. You need to be in video because we can't see each other. And then some managers didn't use it for X reasons, and then it was like, well, you're forcing us to do it, but you're not doing it. And so there's so much subtlety in the communication. You have to make sure that you walk the talk yourself. And then afterwards, I mean, we've seen now after a few months that we do have that fatigue and that stress also being on video the whole day after 10 calls, and you can't walk around your house at the same time as you speak because you have to be stuck in front of your computer.
Right.
So we've actually gone the other way around now. We're telling people that, okay, this is maybe not a meeting where we need videos because it's just an update on a project or whatever. So let's take off the videos.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get that balance. I mean, one, I think it's very important for leaders to walk the talk, right? It's, you know, the video is a good example. Another example is, you know, often leaders telling their employees to take a break and have a morning off and stuff like that. But if they themselves don't do it and they're ones they're sending emails and things like that at 6 in the morning and 7 at night, they're setting the wrong expectation. So I think that demonstrating that leadership is really important. So I guess from an employee perspective now, for most of us, remote working full-time is new. And as we talked about it, right now it's a very extreme version of remote working. Do you think that employees have been given the support and the resources that they need? Daryl, what's your thoughts?
Yes, and I think it's what we've experienced is that because we were fairly well set up anyway, it's been less about operational requirements and more about the periphery conditions that people are working under and distractions, and it's been such a variety. And so again, like looking at research that we've conducted in the last few weeks, we found that distraction is 7 times more likely to be mentioned at the moment than it used to be. And when you dig into the verbatims, it's being used in a positive way. People are talking about less distraction and higher levels of productivity. But the antithesis to that, or the counterexample, is that people who are looking after kids are having the opposite experience, and they're more likely to reference frustration, annoyed, and struggling as a set of words that are coming up 7.1 times more often. So being resourced to get stuff done, it seems like the periphery working conditions are having a greater impact than whether you're operationally equipped.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. I think there's a lot of studies out there that are claiming, productivity is the same and or better and stuff like that. But I guess the question is, at what cost? We did some studies as well recently, and I think in that 77% of people said they're working the same or actually more hours from home. I think there's almost that notion of digital presenteeism where people feel that they almost have to overcompensate for not being physically visible, and they're always online, always responsive. So sure, they're getting through their work, but just how is that from a digital wellness perspective and a well-being and fatigue and burnout? Katerina, what's your thoughts?
I think that's where the clear communication becomes so important, and really creating clear rules. And as you say, that the leaders are walking the walk, basically, where it is clearly said, every organization is different, but it's in a time window between 10 and 4, we need people fairly available and quickly being able to respond, as an example. But in the rest of the time, it's fine if you need to bring your kids to bed, and if you are then happy to do, an hour's work because you couldn't do it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It just needs to be basically communicated. All the policies and rules or subtle rules that were there in the office, it's just a new setup where we need to think about all the new circumstances that are there, and how every situation, every employee situation is so individual. And I think employers need to ask, what do you need as an individual? Because some people have really small living situations as well, talking about the big cities across the world. And they didn't have the setup to work from home, just from the simple desk, chair, not getting back pains, etc. from that setup. Or as we discussed, the whole homeschooling thing, which might change now. That will be interesting now when kids are going back to school now, and home working becomes hopefully a little bit easier for parents when the kids are at school. So I think but we need to ask individual employees, what is it that they need? What kind of support do they need?
No, that's right. That's right. Maria?
Yeah, no, I think that you're right. And I mean, we're selling technology, but also you can give an employee all the technology you want, but if you don't enable them to use it, or if you don't give them the tools how to use it in the right way, it won't work anyway.
No,
So I think
right.
the communication is key. And I mean, we've been given a lot of different trainings on how to handle stress, how to handle working from remotely, because not everybody did so from the beginning, and that juggling things. And we saw also in one of the researches we did was that we have 9% higher exhaustion rates, and you actually make more mistakes than people that are not interrupted all the time and having the stress of kids running around, and just giving them the opportunity to really get their planning right. I think one of the backsides of telling people you can have flexible working hours is that you're actually working more, and you're working at all hours. You work at weekends because you have that bad conscience of, oh, I didn't work for 2 hours this afternoon, so I have to connect at 9 p.m. and I work until midnight. And so just have that for myself. I mean, I've set up calendar times where you no longer have that blockage where it's like, oh, I have to get my kids from tennis, or I have to do, so I blocked time in the end. It was like, okay, I have to do dinner now, if not my kids would die. so it's I blocked the calendar off for also my personal things, so you don't forget to stop working.
No, that's right. And I think it's interesting because, you know, in a normal environment, when you're in the office, even when you have meetings, you do have those natural breaks between meetings when you go from one room to another, or you have to jump in a taxi and go see someone and things like that. At home, because you're at home, people tend to stack up the meetings, and you go back to back to back, and you suddenly realize that I've been here for 5 hours on video, I haven't left, and I just feel exhausted. And I've had that feeling myself, and you know, Maria, I've done exactly that at times, where if I know I'm in a block of meetings, then I put an hour break where I feel, or tell myself, it's okay if I sit in the living room and watch some TV in the middle of the day, because, you know, I need a break. So I think that's really interesting. And the other point I wanted to make is, you know, that notion of feeling that you have to always be on. And I think that's a really important thing, that as a leader, you have to demonstrate that it's fine not to be responsive, or to set the right expectations. I was talking to a bank here in Australia, and they've implemented some really interesting policies to try and help balance that. And one of them was no emails after 7 p.m. Because if it's super urgent, you can call someone. So basically they've stopped emails after 7 p.m. They've also blocked off every Thursday morning as no meetings. So people have some free time to actually get some focused work done. So it's been interesting to see how different organizations have really helped support their employees in trying to maintain a balance and really have that digital well-being. So the next question I wanted to get to was, you know, I guess in this realm of pandemic and remote working and the change in leadership required, I guess leadership is often seen as one of the reasons why people leave a company. I mean, do you think this whole environment that we're in now will lead to more turnover or less? Daryl, I'll start with you.
I think this is such a interesting question, because we don't know.
Probably too early.
Yeah, and people's behaviours fundamentally changed to this kind of lockdown, fear-driven. You know, it's become this sort of employer's market. My inbox is inundated at the moment with job applications and CVs, and so I think even if people have had a bad time, they may still be sitting still. And one of my friends runs a company that does sort of surveys for large organizations, you know, very employee engagement surveys and 360s and things. And they found that even during this period when a lot of us leaders are a little bit clueless as to what's going on with people, the number of surveys being conducted has reduced, which is which means we're even more in the dark than we used to be. So I think it's a fascinating question, and I don't even know where to start answering that. I don't know what the consequence is. I have no idea at all. But I think that the fact that we have no idea is fascinating. We are in this strange period of time where, in so many ways, economically and in terms of employee engagement and satisfaction and people's decisions that they're making, and people are moving, and people are challenging or questioning every aspect of their life, and I think we haven't fully seen the impact of that yet.
No, that's right. Katerina, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree with Daryl, and these are so unique circumstances, and I think also now that the recession is going on, and there's still a level of fear from an economic perspective, but still a level of fear from the whole COVID experience as well, and that is impacting our behavior. When we are in a state of fear, the majority of people are not the explorers and going out and setting up their own businesses necessarily. So I think we will see, as Dario said, employees sticking to their jobs because of a state of fear. When that vanishes, what we've also seen over the last few years is that value-driven, as Maria said, value-driven leadership is becoming more and more important, and the younger generations are demanding a more socially responsible, a nicer organization to work in. And I think as soon as that fear resigns, that will become even more important. As Daryl said, we had more time to introspect and to figure out what is it that we really want. So I think it will be interesting to see what happens in the next 2 to 5 years, because I think we will see a change that employees, if the fear goes away, will not stick to these organizations that have bad leadership.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I think both you and Daryl sort of touched on was just, this is almost a really big self-reflection point for people, not just from an employee perspective, but for people. I'm based here in Australia, and even in the beginnings of the pandemic and the lockdown, there was so many people that were spending more time with their families because they had to, but they're discovering and reconnecting with their families. We found so many more people were just doing stuff around the house because they're locked in the house. All the hardware shops are busy because people are renovating and gardening and building stuff. So I think people are sort of reconnecting with their lives. And I know for a long time, everyone's always talked about that work-life balance, and it's probably still focused on work, but I think this has given us an opportunity to really reflect on our priorities and what's important. And I feel it's a real big opportunity for us to reset the routine of work that we've been in for so long and say, how do we get a better balance? Maria, anything from you?
Yeah, no, I think it's well, a few things. I think the reflection has been important. I've seen it with our own employees, and especially on the leaders level, where they were between 60 and 80% of their time flying around and spending their times in planes. And they said, I actually realized that I could do a lot more work from home, or I can actually cut my travel into half when we go back to normal life again. And secondly, what you said, Daryl, about no research or less research is being done now, that's scary, because we should do more of them now to get to take the temperature of the employees and have that feeling. I have it a little bit through the teams and through my own sort of live research when we talk to candidates. And I think my personal view is that we have few levers now, because we're still recruiting heavily. So luckily it's only minority of the candidates we speak to who are actually saying, I don't want to move now, because that would be an uncertainty on top of all the other uncertainties that we have already. It's a minority, but it exists. But more so, there will be, when we start going back to normal, as you said, Katerina, in maybe a year or whenever it will be, we don't know. But we will have a lot of levers, because we will see how, people have thought about what's important for them, not only on the personal life, but also what's important for them in the culture of the company and values. And the companies, we will see how the companies, how they handle the crisis, how they prepare for the future. That will mean a lot on how the employees will react in the future. You know, I've seen candidates come to me and say, well, actually, I'm open to leave because I'm so disappointed in how the company reacted during the crisis. Some companies cut the salaries 10-15%, and they still gave out the dividend to the shareholders. That was a no-go for many employees. So they say, well, when I get the opportunity, I will look for another job. So it's, and also, I mean, in the future, employees will expect, especially the younger generation, but even the older ones now, when we've sort of discovered the remote working and the flexible workings. I mean, one of the researches we did was 76% of workers say they would be more loyal if they had a flexible working option. And they will be expecting this in the future. So if the companies are not switching to that, and the biggest error they can do, I think, would be go back as they were before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things where if this pandemic period, the lockdown had only gone for a week or two and then everyone went back to normal, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. Whereas because it's gone on for so long, and yes, it's been tough and difficult, but for the most part, we've continued to move forward. You know, obviously there's some industries that are impacted more, but I don't think we could put the cap back on. Like, it's out there now, and I think the expectations are there. And absolutely, I think the newer generations that are coming into the workforce will have the expectation of flexibility. Maria, you talked about recruitment and candidates. You know, obviously bringing on people during this period, onboarding people and making employees feel part of the company, the culture, is a different process when it's all remote. I mean, how do you approach that?
It was a switch, of course, but less maybe for us. I mean, within, again, just a few days, we moved to total 100% remote video interviewing. We needed to do some coaching of the hiring managers, of course, to do it. I think when it came to the recruitment itself, the biggest thing was making people comfortable in taking a decision on both sides, candidates as well as hiring managers, to take a decision without even meeting each other. And so we saw more interviews. Hiring managers needed more people to bring in their saying into, who should we recruit? Would it be the right person? The important also of assessments, maybe the assessment tools we've started using more of, to not to eliminate somebody, but more to bring those tools into the conversations and see how do our values fit your values, and would it feel good? And I think in both on onboarding and in the recruitment process, over communicate. That was the key that I quickly went out to our leaders with, because for us it was a normal thing. For us it was natural to move to virtual and even virtual onboarding, but people didn't understand how we could actually onboard somebody virtually. And so over communication, and stay very close to the candidates, because we had more drop-offs, of course, because you're scared, and it was the lockdown as well. And so, and also another key thing that I've seen recently is when you have onboarded people, it's even more important to have a great onboarding experience, and having that, you actually feel more, less loyal today, because a candidate can, after a month within a job, you haven't met your managers, you haven't seen the office, you haven't had that bonding. You haven't found new friends, you don't feel you wouldn't feel any bad conscience if another company calls you and give you a little bit of a higher salary, and you would just change your computer. You don't even change your office. And that's where it's really key to stay close to both candidates and the newly onboarded people.
Yeah, that's right. Katerina, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think it just needs, as Maria said, more communication with the people and almost creating that social bonding between employees outside of the business meetings again. So, how do we get to know each other in that virtual setting, and in order to create more loyalty or generally more bonding. So I think that's probably what we need to think about when we get new people on board. How can we offer an experience of the company culture? And as Daryl said, there are always subtleties, even in the virtual space. But I think it's not as easy to grab the culture if we don't have the office.
No, that's right. Daryl?
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I think sort of from our direct experience, we made a senior leadership hire, and they began a couple of weeks into the lockdown, and we've also acquired another agency. So we did an acquisition as well in this period of time, and and we're pretty good at understanding the need for communication, and in times like this, over communication. I spend all my time just chatting with people and are you okay, and coaching and whatever. So but the thing that I found really fascinating as a change is that initially every conversation sort of ended with, well, we must get together, well, when we see each other, and we must have a whatever is your pleasure, get together for a drink, or be great to get together for a meeting in person, or whatever it was. And the strange thing I found is that that's died out a little bit. So it's almost like we've accepted this now as a norm. And it's sort of now a bit of an afterthought. Oh yeah, it'd be nice to meet up one day, but it's no longer felt as a necessity, which it did 5 months ago. It was like we were somehow being impoverished by not being able to be in the same room. And now it's become well, it'll be nice when it happens. Yeah. And I think that's a really strong indication of a kind of an unconscious change of expectation, or a difference in how we think we're going to interact in the future.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, and while I got you, Daryl, I guess thinking about the future, I mean, a lot of people have, I guess some concerns and anxiety about going back to the office, depending on what country you're in. Changes continue to happen. Some places it's getting worse. Other places are planning a return to work dates and that. I mean, how do you lead a return to the office? How do you make employees feel comfortable? How do you make sure they're still safe? And the follow-up question to that, I mean, do we still need an office?
Yeah, is that?
Yeah, that's for you, Daryl.
Okay, yeah. Well, we have a lovely office right in the middle of Soho in London, and we're not pushing. We're not opening it up until next year. We've made that as a decision, and we're certainly not pushing people to come back, because we've decided we no longer want it to be somewhere that people go to do tasks or to type, really. So we're remodeling it, and it's now lounge spaces and meeting rooms, and it's entirely for bringing people into the business to collaborate, whether that's clients or team members. So in the future, what an office is, it has fundamentally changed for us. It's somewhere you go to interact with people in a connected way, rather than somewhere you go to do tasks and be visible to each other. So that's changed. One of my friends is head of workspace at Barclays, and she's emphasizing this, that the office has always really been about social connection. It's about hubbub, and it's about using your 5 senses to create deeper and more robust relationships to get stuff done together. And people who recognize that and embrace that will do better. And it very much links to the point earlier about loyalty. And much as we're doing our best to make use of this media, it isn't the same. There is a formality to it. All of the quizzes that lasted for the first 2 months of lockdown have disappeared, with people just, after a day of Zoom calls, the last thing you want to do is do a Zoom quiz. It's no longer appealing.
No,
So
right.
that kind of stuff disappeared, and I think it's indicative of that kind of change. I think
Yeah.
there is still a fundamental need to get together, and it's almost like we're becoming almost too agreeable in accepting that lack of human connection. I think we do still need it, and so much as I don't want to push people back into the office, I do think there is a need to champion quality human connection, one way or another, and do what we can to try and facilitate that.
No, that's right. Katerina?
Yeah, I agree. I think it will, in the long term, it will be a balance between home office and office work. And I think people are also different. I think some people are much more comfortable working from home, and others, we're talking about new employees, but some people have a stronger social interaction need than others as well. Mm-hmm. So I think providing the opportunity and allowing employees to choose, not necessarily to rule out one or the other, and still saying, as Daryl said, we still need the human interaction. So that should happen again when it's safe at some point. But I think it comes back to the trust level, just allowing employees to choose what they feel most comfortable with. And I think those companies who are forcing their employees back to the office, it's really interesting why they're forcing that. I believe there's a trust issue lying underneath that. But what they're forgetting is also when people are in a state of anxiety, when people are feeling insecure coming back to the office, the brain is not as productive as it can be. They're occupied with the anxiety of, oh my God, how shall I act here? Is it social distancing here? How often do I need to wash my hands now? I hope companies are taking care of these measurements. But it's on a non-conscious level, that anxiety level is there. And the question is, are people then in that stage truly more productive by forcing them back into the office? Or would it actually be smarter to just leave them at home if they don't feel comfortable and are too scared to come back for now?
Yeah, agree. And I think what you said in the beginning is important. It's got to be a balance. I don't think it's going to end up being one or the other. It end up being a hybrid model where we provide the flexibility for employees to come to a place to gather and interact socially and collaborate. But at the same time, if you just got to write a document or get through some tasks, you can do that in the comfort of your own home. And Maria, I know within Citrix, I know there's been a comprehensive set of plans, a phase strategy on how we go back to the office. It's been different from country to country. What are your thoughts around our approach?
I think it's a good approach because we're putting health and security in the center of our what's important. And we work closely with medical experts, with public safety, with the authorities in each country, to really build a toolkit and guidelines to how to bring back our people to work. And I think as you said as well, people react differently. We have to be very flexible because we've had countries where we will almost to what we call phase 3, where sort of 50% you can go back to the office, but in 50% at the same time, sort of, and now we've had to move back again overnight because COVID came back again. So we're not trying to keep the hopes up too much. And then it's also, we're doing quite a lot of temperature checking with our employees, and we've seen that in EMEA, for example, 50% of our employees would like to go back to the office at least a few days a week to have that social connection. 50% do not want to go back or are scared going back due to many reasons, like Katerina said, and also if you have to take the public transportation to go into work, you don't want to do that. So we're trying to balance that and navigate through and finding sort of the best solution for everyone, and it's not always easy, but it's we have to take into account everybody's personal situation in this.
And I think that was really good. I mean, for me as an employee of Citrix, I really appreciated being asked. It wasn't a decision that was made somewhere above me to say, hey, this is the plan. There was a lot of quite deep questionnaire, because in Sydney now they're sort of trying to prep. And I actually just did a survey earlier this week, and you're right, Maria, it was quite comprehensive. How do you feel about commuting? How do you feel about this? How many days a week you want to work? And I think that, and we talked about it before, around the importance of communication and making employees feel comfortable, because if they're not comfortable, to your point, Katerina, they're not going to be effective at work, because they're just worried about the commute to work, all the people around there, the safety, that like it's just there. So yeah, I think communication is the key around all of this stuff. So I guess that sort of brings me to my next question around the culture of the workplace. You know, obviously when you've got an office, you have some level of control around how you create a culture, you know, the practices that you put in place in the workplace. But now we're at home, where we're seeing people in their studies, in their living rooms. Do you think workplace culture has changed, or is it just amplified the good parts of workplace culture and amplified the bad as well? I mean, Daryl, what's your thoughts around, has workplace culture actually changed?
Again, it's another one of these things that's quite tricky to get a barometer on, because the interactions are a lot artificial. But I certainly think there's in our organisation there's a bit more micro culture bubbling up, because I think fundamentally culture is the most influencing factor is visible leadership behaviour, and those implicit senses of what you reward and or not. And so I think, you know, with us, you know, we may have an all hands, you know, every so often, but that tends to be a bit of a broadcast, and so most of the cultural influence is happening at team level. So I'm seeing, you know, different cultures bubbling up from team to team. But it's very difficult to make a broad brush sort of attribution to culture. I think all business culture surely must have been changed and impacted to some degree. And I think the more interesting question is at the individual behavioural level. You know, how is this impacting us? And again, as this is sort of at the beginning, from culture and leadership point of view, you know, all of the things that were good leadership before are still good leadership now. It's and I think those things are still absolutely consistent, just more crucial.
No, that's right. Katerina?
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think, as you said, I think things have been amplified in the good way and in the bad way. It has just come out, basically. I think what we talked about in the beginning as well, it is how do we behave? How do we communicate in emails, on you know, on camera, on the video calls? That is where culture has always been picked up, but this is even more so now, and you know, where we said communication becomes ever more important, because we need to be really sure that what we are communicating via email, for example, ever more now, or on all other channels, is understood the way we meant it. You know, I think there's more realm now for misunderstandings and the way people interpret whatever you're writing. And I think that needs a focus, because this is heavily influencing the culture of an organization in that virtual setting now. So I think that's important. We've seen some reports, which was quite interesting, that there was less bullying going on because of the subtlety that you had in the offices. You know, the weird look over coffee or whatever it is, the gossiping in the corner, you know, whatever it was, but that has gone. Not saying that bullying is completely gone and it cannot happen via email as well, but we heard stories around that as well, which was quite interesting.
Yeah. Maria?
Yeah, no, I think we've seen, I think the values in a company is being even stronger during this period, and being bad or good. I mean, I've seen examples where a big technology company, I won't say the name, who went out immediately and said, we're all remote, but we still expect our people to do the best and work like maniacs, and it was really strong message you do not have the right to do anything else than work. It was very, yeah, it was interesting, and the reaction of the employees as well, and it was really backfired on them. And where and I've seen the really nice part about Citrix, because I haven't been here coming up for a year now, and that was the positive surprise for me, that our values were really brought up on that being your human, listening to people, and really taking care of the human side of the company, which actually then brings out the best of people. So we actually went out, and it's the first time I've seen a CEO go out on a Friday evening during the real lockdown, when we worked really, really hard because we needed all our clients to go home. And he went out globally and said, I don't want to see anyone connected this weekend. If not, you're going to be on burnout, all of you. So stop working. That's the first time in my life that I've seen a CEO go out and say, stop working. But it really gives, the culture. And I think it's humanized a lot of cultures, and humanized the relationship also with, even clients. I've asked one of our sales leaders and said, how is it now to negotiate with, the big deals, for example? Do a CIO sign those multi-million deals now remote? And they're just like, well, actually they didn't in the beginning, but they're starting doing it, and they can't be scary anymore. They can't scream because they're sitting in their daughter's room with a Barbie doll behind them, so they can't be feared. So actually the conversations are much more human and much more nicer in the negotiations.
No, that's right. And I think that's a really important point. And that's what I was going to raise as well, that I do feel through this period, we've all humanized an employee. I think because often employees are just seeing, and I know I'm being extreme, like factory workers. You go into the office, you do a whole bunch of meetings and work, and you go home. But I think through this period and remote working, we were talking about it before, we've invited people into our homes, and we can see our children and our pets are walking around. We often spend the beginning or the end of a meeting talking about our personal lives. How's it going there? How are you dealing with it? I find even with my team, myself, probably 50% of our conversations have nothing to do with work. We're just talking about, I did this, I did a barbecue this, and it's just more really humanize the relationships that we have with our co-workers. And I've really enjoyed it. It has been an extreme circumstance and stressful and all that, but I've really enjoyed learning more about the people I work with. So I definitely think there's a change there, and it'll be interesting to see if these changes, from remote working to leadership changes, are actually here to stay. And I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that, Katarina. Do you think these things are going to stick around once we all go back to normal?
Well, I think just from a behavioral point of view, the longer we are exposed to things, creating new habits and are used to more things, the more likely it is that things will stay. So, as you said in the beginning, had the lockdown just been 2 weeks, we wouldn't have seen any changes. No. But now people are getting used more and more to a new working environment. And as Maria said, people will start demanding this now, because we have proven that productivity is possible from home, and will be even more so if anxiety levels are absent at some point, and if homeschooling doesn't need to be done to that extreme anymore. So I think we will see changes, and we will see sustained changes, and sticking to what we have learned now to a degree, not everything, but some of it.
Absolutely. Daryl?
Yeah, I think what I've found really interesting is that it's been a catalyst for a lot of changes that were primed already. So for a long time, we've been talking about work-life balance, and we've been talking about traveling less and impact on the planet, and we've been talking about using digital technology more and making more use of the tools that we have, and better use of them. But there was always a or there was a habit or a historic behavior or whatever. And I think this has been the most dramatic catalyst to prove to us what's possible, or at least to have that experience. And So now we're in a world where people are saying, well, I would like to go back to the office, but only one day. And, you know, we've had that opportunity to revise things. We've had that opportunity to see things a different way. So I think definitely these changes are here to stay, because employees will demand them, you know, having had this experience. And I think some of them are quite good. You know, there's to put a value judgment on it, I think, you know, that a lot of changes are welcome. I mean, obviously it's a terrible situation, and, you know, it's been awful, but I think some of the changes that have happened are long-term are good things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maria?
Yeah, no, I agree. And the acceleration has been really visible. I looked at just and Decathlon, for example, is a French company, but it's one of the global leaders in sportswear, and they had their new strategy for 2030 on the remote working and things like that. They moved it now to become the strategy of 2021. Wow. So they just accelerated by almost 10 years, and I think we have to. It's a whole new way of looking at things and collaborating also in the companies. We've seen it from an HR point of view. I mean, we I wouldn't say never, but almost never worked with IT before over the last years, but it's accelerated enormously, because I talked about the future of work before this, and how we're starting working with IT, etc. But now we're really in it. And it's not only the business in IT who looks at it. We work with HR, working with IT, working with facilities, and working with the business leaders, all those four groups together to make sure that we have that flexible working space, and how will it look like, and keeping that employee experience in the middle.
Yeah, so and I think that's really important. You know, I think the way we go through this process and learn from it, you know, we've seen so many people, as all of you guys have mentioned, accelerate their transformation. You know, I think that meme had been going around the internet for a while around who led the digital transformation of your company. Was it the CEO, the CIO, or was it a COVID-19? And I think, as you rightly said, Daryl, obviously this situation is bad, and, you know, there's people's health at risk, but it's really given everyone an opportunity to reset and think about what's important and how we balance those priorities. And hopefully it's for the better, not only for the organization, but for humanity. You know, I think even if you look at all the impact, the positive impact to the environment, you know, where we've seen smog levels go down and waters be clearer. And I think the fact that we've seen that firsthand shows us that change is possible. It's not some insurmountable thing that's going to happen in 10, 20 years time. If we make some minor changes and shift the way that we work in our routine, we can definitely change the way we work and the way we live. And so with that, I want to thank you for attending the 4th episode of the New Workspace. And thank you to Daryl, Katerina, and Maria for joining us and really sharing those interesting perspectives and insights. Make sure to register in the attachment section for episode 5, where we'll be discussing how to build a resilient business for the future of work. I'll see you next time.